Aujourd'hui, je vais parler de one of those quintessential questions that makes up financial independence, which is how much money did I feel like personally was enough for me to exit the workforce and sustain myself indefinitely? How about for my wife as well, right? Hey, XenPuck here. So today's a personal episode where I share with you how much money I thought I needed to retire early, right? I mean, I think I've mentioned I've never had any side hustles, right? And what I was looking forward to is just starting over, doing something for myself, like what I'm doing right now, right? Obviously, if you are a viewer at this point, we're most likely actual real-life friends, and that's okay. Like I said, with a tiny audience, I can feel truly free to be myself, and there's definitely value in that. And of course, in terms of bringing value, i.e. money into my life, I love the luxury of actually not having to think about how completely of a fail my current channel is at that. That's the freedom in being in real fire, right? Anyway, I'll use my example and quote what I believe my wifey's version of that is, but maybe someday she'll do her own update, you know, on her own behalf, right? So, number one, for myself now, first I want to mention how I arrived at this number, right? Sure, I like the 4% rule, but that's really more of a guideline, right? Everyone's circumstances are obviously different. So what I do is I simply look at my actual spending, assuming I've settled in the area that I will be post-retirement. So to prepare for that part, I actually bought a house in a much lower cost of living area a year prior to giving my notice, right? And during that year, I had it fixed up. This is important because while I was renovating, I still had a regular steady income to account for, you know, renovation costs, right, and overruns. And boy, when it comes to renovations that you are not doing yourself, there will be overruns in cost. And of course, I also never planned on having a car because I knew in early retirement, well, it's not like I needed it for the commute, and specifically, I have bought a house in a city where I could easily get regular daily goods and services via walking or public transport, right? So now, if one really considers regular spending without housing and car costs, we're really down to a very basic level of subsistence, right? To me, I remember thinking, I was like, wow, besides housing and car, really what's left? Food, entertainment, and other sort of vices? I mean, I drink a lot, right? So food and drinks, right? See, that's when I realized that outside of the cost of my house, at the time I had a single rental property, right? And the income from that would cover almost all of my remaining basic living costs, right? That's what I'd call my lean fire number, essentially. So the house cost, a rental property at that point, added together, was probably around a little less, but around $1 million, right? That's basically what I would call my lean fire number. I know, you know, on the internet, if you read about lean fire, some people think like 500,000 is enough. To me, it's closer to $1 million, right? But still, remember, this is a nothing sexy budget, right? I wouldn't be able to, I would be able to visit my folks who live out of state and visit some friends if I took care to look for flights during opportune times, right? Because you have to remember, I'd be in retirement, so I could actually look for cheap flights whenever it's convenient, rather than only traveling during the holidays, along with the rest of America. So that does work out, right? But remember, on my lean fire budget, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to say take a luxury international trip, for instance, right? I'm certainly not flying business class if I'm doing that, right? Yet, remember, I'm a very conservative dude, so if I knew that I could get along, you know, at a basic level at around $1 million, of course I didn't quit until I had at least twice that much, right? So 2x my lean fire number is what I would consider my regular fire number, so about $2 million. Now, I've asked my wifey the same questions, right, about what she thought her fire number would be, right? Luckily, I've never had to convince her that this is a viable path in life, because our value system is surprisingly similar. I feel very lucky to have met her, right? Now, first you have to understand, my wifey's definitely more bougie than me. Right? She likes wine bars, fancy cocktails, and holds on to her Louis Vuitton bag like a badge of honor. But even more luckily for me, she's definitely not excessive in any of her bougie interests, right? Or else we wouldn't get along, right? And her answer to this question has always been around 1.5 mil. See, I think that's very reasonable because according to, like, if you use a straight up 4% rule to extrapolate how much money you would need, at 1.5 million, you know, you'd be able to generate an annual income of about 60K a year, which is around the median income per household in the US. Recall, this $60,000, it's just middle class for a household, and the average household size is certainly bigger than 1, right? I think it's actually something like 2.3, right? So in that sense, when my wifey quotes 1.5 million as her FIRE number, she is also building in redundancy in her calculations already, right? Maybe not as aggressive as the 2x version that I went for from, you know, super basic, but, you know, similar type of idea anyway. So point number 3. Finally, what about the financial independence retire early number for the two of us combined? Now this one I think is actually, I mean, obviously it's a hypothetical exercise because I literally met my wifey after I already gave notice at my corporate job. So in a way I was already retired effectively when we got to know each other, right? And also theoretical because my wifey right now is still chugging along at her job, right? I mean, I hope that tells you where she's at least implicitly, right? Unless, of course, who knows, maybe she's inflated her own FIRE goal at this point after hearing about my number. That's possible. Okay, definitely possible. And frankly, I think when firing as a couple, there are actually some savings involved compared to separately, right? For example, in our separate calculations, we both had to account for housing, but together that housing cost should be able to be mitigated to some extent, right? Same with food, especially when we're making food or cooking, especially last year and a half it's been COVID time, so everybody's been doing more cooking, right? And making food definitely does not cost double when cooking for two, simply because we have more economies of scale with more people, right? So generally, I'd say the FIRE number should be around somewhere a little bit less than the sum of our two partial goals, right? So I'd call it, since the sum is 3.5, I'd call it around 3 million, right? So yeah, I'm comfortable with 3 million as our combined FIRE goal because it could essentially generate more than 100K indefinitely if we need it to be that way, right? Now obviously I can't really test that right now since my wifey hasn't called it quits yet, nor has she told me whether or when she will, but I have faith that I'll convince her to come to the dark side of relaxing and traveling whenever we'd like, rather than being dictated by some corporate entity that, you know, dictates most of our schedule as well, right? What about you guys? When do you feel like you can retire and not ever worry about how to live again? And what would you do then with your time? Tap or click on that subscribe button, like and share, or whatever, right? Because that's how free I am. Cheers. I'll approach it.